Total Retail, in partnership with Fidel, is proud to announce the release of its latest research report, Customer Loyalty in a Fragmented Retail Market: How Retailers Can Leverage Data to Create Long-Term Relationships with Their Customers. To download your copy of this report, go to mytotalretail.com/resources.
Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hi, I'm Joe Keenan of Total Retail. Thanks for joining us today on Total Retail Talks. I am joined this afternoon by Mariah Chase, who is the CEO of ELOQUII. We're going to talk to Mariah a little bit about ELOQUII's communication strategy during the COVID-19 crisis, and particularly about its use of social influencers during this time. So thanks for joining me today, Mariah.
Thanks, Joe. Happy to be here.
So let's start off by having you briefly tell our audience a little bit about ELOQUII.
Sure. So my favorite topic, glad you asked. So ELOQUII was actually originally launched in late 2011 by the Limited to address customers who are lapsing out of the Limited's core size offering. It was run under the Limited as sort of a sister brand for about 18 months, and then the Limited shut it down. When it was shut down and it was announced to the customers that it was shut down, the customers freaked out. There were blogs that were written, there was social media outcry, and these customers were saying, this was in sort of early 2013, hey, wait a second, I'm a plus size woman, I have very, very few options to begin with, and I loved ELOQUII, and now you've taken away from me. What am I supposed to do? That outcry, combined with some of the original founders of the brand under the Limited, who are super passionate about the customer and really understood that there was potentially a bigger opportunity here, teamed up with a private investor who ended up buying the brand from the Limited, just the assets. And together we relaunched the brand and what we called ELOQUII 2.0 in February of 2014. And the key difference in this version of ELOQUII is that we are much more fashion driven, conscious of trends, and we really went to great lengths to shorten our supply chain so that we could really be quick when responding to trends.
Great. That provides a nice little overview of the company for our audience. I also wanted to talk to you a little bit and find out about your professional background. Tell us how you ended up at ELOQUII and a little bit about your career so far.
Yeah, so my background, hard to describe. It's like a motley mix. I went into fashion straight after college, really working specifically in communications, brand management, celebrity relations, then went on and did licensing, business development, a lot of partnerships, and then went into general management. It was in 2010 when I did my first startup, which was a subscription e-commerce business in fashion accessories called Send the Trend, which was bought by QVC in 2012, and stayed with QVC for a while, and then found ELOQUII. And I really was, having spent all of that time in fashion, when I started to really research the market for women's sizes 14 and up, I was blown away by the data around the significance of this customer, her spending power, and how underrepresented she was from a market penetration perspective, coupled with the lack of quality offerings that existed for her both in stores and online. So that really was what drew me to ELOQUII, just this really exciting opportunity to give this customer more options, but also hopefully be a part of changing the way society thinks about this customer and what she deserves.
So as we record this episode, we're still kind of in the throes of the coronavirus, and obviously the impact it's had on many industries, retail included. I'm interested in hearing of how your brand at ELOQUII has kind of evolved its communication strategy. You just talked about your customer and serving them. Tell us a little bit about how the company is communicating with its customers during this kind of challenging times for so many.
Yeah, I think we want to be sensitive and we want to keep it real, right? One of our internal core values is authenticity, and we think that that's key here. You know, Joe, going back to what I was saying earlier about the sort of the rebirth of ELOQUII in 2014, that really came because the customers cried out and we listened and we recognized sort of what they wanted. And I think that's very much what's happening right now. We always work to understand where our customers' heads are at. We have direct personal relationships with a lot of our customers. In fact, I talked to one of them last night. And so as soon as this started, we gathered internally and said, okay, we're always in contact with our customer, right? We're talking to her on social, we're talking to her via email. A lot of us have personal relationships, but what we really need to do is get clear on, not just on a one-time basis, but on an ongoing basis, where she's at, what's happening for her. So that was, I can't say it was a big pivot from our communication strategy. I think we just dialed it up a little bit.
So you mentioned the fact you have these direct and close personal relationships, and you really, you want to be in touch with your customers. And you mentioned you talked to a customer last night. So my next question is, what are you hearing from your customers? What do they expect from ELOQUII during this time?
I think that they want ELOQUII to be ELOQUII, right? They don't want us, they want fashion content. They want part of what fashion does, right, is it's at its highest power, is it makes you dream, it inspires, it's aspirational. And ELOQUII is a fashion brand, right? We don't sell utility items. We're oftentimes selling like pink organza sleeveless bow blouses, right? They're not something that you necessarily come across every day. And she wants us to remain true to that, at the same time being sensitive to what's going on in the world and the fact that the majority of our customers are likely not going into an office right now. And so how can we shift our communications so that we're us, we're real, it's fashion, but it's very, very aware of the current climate.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to follow up with in terms of, you just said it, people aren't going into the office right now. People aren't going out to dinner. They're not going to, events. So how's that kind of impacted the business? Are you seeing, less demand, or, people want to find these outlets and shopping is kind of a fun activity for customers? What are you seeing there in terms of demand?
We are seeing, so the way that the business has really shifted has a lot been in the way of working, right? So like many businesses, we are working from home. And one of the things that we used to do every day in the office was photography. We did all of our photo shoots in the office, and given that that is now not possible, we've pivoted to working with 5 amazing influencers, where we're actually sending samples of merchandise of upcoming collections to them directly, and they're able to shoot usually at their homes with a partner, a boyfriend, a husband, as the photographer. And so I think that has been the biggest change in terms of the way of working, and something that we're really, really excited about. I'm really grateful to these influencers who are like, yes, we'll do it. We'll partner. We'll be your models. And in terms of the shift in what she's buying, we're still seeing one of a kind fashion sell really well.
So for your social influencers, had that been a big kind of strategy and part of the marketing mix for the ELOQUII brand prior to the pandemic, and or is this something new that you've kind of just started to test out?
No, we've always worked with influencers. Some of the influencers were the ones who cried out the loudest when ELOQUII was shut down by the Limited, and so we have always had, I like to think, and the influencers can keep me honest if this is not accurate, but a really close relationship with many of them. And so this was not necessarily, the relationships were not new, the partnerships were not new, but we have never before asked influencers to really be our models. Usually our partnerships have been around generating incremental content to tell specific stories, to be able to the influencers to tell stories to their followers and their sort of fan bases. And that was, if that happens, that's the influencer's choice. But really the intent was for us to get the photography that we need in order for customers to be able to see the clothing.
Yeah. And then how about the different ways that you're leveraging that content that's being created by these social influencers? Obviously, ELOQUII social channels on your site. Tell us a little bit about the strategy there in terms of getting that content out to your customers.
Yeah, just what you said, we love emailing our customers. So you'll definitely see some of the beautiful content in our emails, in our text program, on social media, definitely on our site. I think the one thing that's been a little bit different is that we are giving the influencers a good amount of creative license within, sort of broad general guidelines. And so the diversity of the photography that we're getting back looks very different than our sort of steady state e-commerce product photography. And it's interesting to now see it mixed into the site. And we're seeing some like incredible results. And I think it's just very eye-opening, the benefits that change can bring.
How about the kind of the process for finding and aligning with these social influencers and kind of the vetting process? You obviously want somebody that's going to represent the brand in a way that you want it to be out there in the public. Can you tell us about finding those right influencers and kind of the process that is involved with that?
Yeah, so all of these, Danny Sauter, Lydia Hudgens, Maxie Green, Rochelle Johnson, and Kelly Augustine, we know all of them. We've worked with all of them in the past. We have direct relationships with all of them. So it was really the idea was who can safely get this photography done? Who's got the aperture and the ability and wants to do this photography, wants to be our model, and who can get it done without having to go into a photo studio, who can maintain social distancing. So that was really our number one priority. And then looking, at another level, we wanted to have a diversity, right? Diversity of races, diversity of sizes, of body proportions. That's always something that we love to be able to represent working with influencers, because it's not something you get to always do with models.
Yeah. And that diversity within your influencers, I guess that's meant to be reflective of your audience too, your customer base. Do you find that you have a pretty diverse customer base?
We do, and we think it's, reflective of kind of the world, like who we are and where we live and where we're going.
Right. So then my final question, Mariah, is just, I'm interested to get your perspective on, any changes that you see in consumer behavior or foresee that might happen in terms of, once we get past the COVID-19 pandemic and we're kind of post-crisis. Do you see, consumer behavior changes that might have cropped up in the last, 6-8 weeks continuing on? And then kind of a second part to that question is, if you do, what are you doing to evolve ELOQUII's business to kind of adapt for those changes?
So I think it's too soon to tell, right? I remain very open eyes, let's say, and very curious about where, once this is all over, where the customer will land, right? There's behavioral changes. Obviously, she's shopping a lot more online because she's not going into stores. Will that continue? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. And I don't, I hesitate to offer any sort of a prediction because I just think it's too soon to tell. That said, I am, as I said, curious to understand where the customer comes out on all of this. I can tell you from ELOQUII's point of view, we will remain in really close contact with our customer. We will continue to ask her what she wants to see, where she's at, and that will be true long after this is all over. And if she tells us, hey, this is the way I want to shop, period, end of story, then that's what we're going to do. That's what all, that's sort of what all businesses need to do. You are nothing without your customers. So we're going to take her lead. We're going to follow her lead.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, great. I want to take this opportunity to thank Mariah Chase, the CEO of ELOQUII, for joining me today and telling us a little bit about the brand's communication strategy and how it's kind of keeping that personal relationship with its customers going, even during a health crisis such as COVID-19. So thanks for joining me, Mariah.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at mytotalretail.com/podcast for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Total Retail Talks.
Total Retail's latest research report, Customer Loyalty in a Fragmented Retail Market, offers insights into retailers' customer retention challenges, how customer data can help address that challenge, particularly data obtained in loyalty programs, the role that card linking technology can play in creating loyal customers through the collection of transactional data, and best practices for earning customer loyalty. To download your copy of this report, go to mytotalretail.com/resources.